What's up everyone, I'm CallumOnToast, and in today's video I'm going to be showcasing an Easter themed team in the Spring Cup, as today is Easter Sunday. So happy Easter to those of you that do celebrate it. And I know what you guys are thinking, Azumarill, really? What has this channel come to? Well, unfortunately Azumarill is the only bunny Pokemon available for this meta, and it probably is the best bunny Pokemon for an Easter themed team, as it does look exactly like an Easter egg. It is also actually not very highly ranked in this meta, but still I never thought I'd be showcasing Azu again in the Go Battle League. Obviously I've also got a level 50 Execute to represent more Easter eggs, and then Togetic, which might not be super obvious, but of course Togepi, its baby form, is also a hatched egg. Now, before we get into the question of the day, I have hidden 5 different eggs throughout various parts of this video, and I'll give a shout out in a future video to the first person that can find all 5 eggs. Just so you guys know, each egg will only appear on screen for about 2 seconds, so you'll have to pay attention throughout. But with that being said, let's just get into the question of the day. What is your favorite event from previous years that for whatever reason hasn't come back this past year, or was nowhere near as good as it was in previous years? Let me know in the comment section down below, and with that being said, let's get into the battles now. Let's go into the first battle, leading Togetic into Shadow Mawile. So of course, this is not an ideal matchup for me. They are going to resist everything I can throw. However, I do not want to swap out, as I cannot allow my Execute to be aligned to this Fire Fang Mawile. Now I'm able to grab an early shield and reach a second Psyshock before they do throw any energy. So Psyshock gets them into the half health range. They do finally throw a charge move, but at this point I'm happy to let the Togetic go down. Iron Head gets the KO there. I can come in with my Azumarill as the opponent fires off another charge move. The opponent is going to go for another Iron Head there before swapping into a Shadow Lapras. Now at this point, I don't know if they're running Ice Beam or Skull Bash as that secondary charge move, so I'm going to stay in with the Azumarill initially. I actually got the final shield here, and at this point they have farmed up a ton of energy, so I will shield, respect the damage. It is a Skull Bash. Now I'm going to go straight for Play Rough, as I realize Play Rough will be needed. A Seed Bomb is not going to get the KO, so I do chip with the Play Rough. I swap into my my Execute, but at this point they are going to go for another Skull Bash. I'm going to shield. They boost up their defense again, and then they come in with a Tropius. Now all shields are down. Obviously, Execute going to be weak to the flying typing, but Ancient Power gets the boost, and that is absolutely huge. Execute already fairly bulky, so now I can tank an Aerial Ace, reach another Ancient Power up against this Tropius. Ancient Power is non-stab, even boosted. It doesn't get the KO, but it puts them into range where I can snipe with my Azumarill. This is still going to be incredibly close, though. The opponent is going to come back in with their Shadow Lapras, but the opponent is going to swap, try to catch a charge move there. I was not at the move. The opponent reaches a last second charge move, but I believe it's just going to be a power up punch. I'm able to resist it, go for the Play Rough, and of course Play Rough from this range takes out the Shadow Lapras, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there. Into next battle, we see Togetic into a Shadow Tentacruel. So, of course, the entire team is going to be weak to the poison typing, which is not ideal since it is actually fairly common in this meta, but we go straight for Psyshock. We're able to connect, and now I'm going to randomly swap and catch the charge move, assuming the opponent will probably just go straight for a Scald, and they do exactly that. That's resisted damage, but they do punish me with a Decidueye. Now, I do reach a last second Ancient Power before they can fully Astonish farm me down, and the opponent also lets that go through. So at this point, I'm actually in a fairly decent position here. We can come back in with the Togetic. I'm just going to shield this first charge move. They go for Spirit Shackle. At this point, I've not shown that I'm running Aerial Ace, so I'm going to go for another Psyshock. Psyshock will get the KO from this range. I'm thinking just in case the opponent's running something like a Cacturn in the back, me not showing that Aerial Ace might be quite helpful for me in the future. But either way, the opponent overfarms too much, and Bubble actually gets the KO. I believe they farmed up 2 back-to-back Frenzy Plants, but that's a huge mistake on the opponent's end. They come in with the Shadow Cacturn. I'm going straight for Play Rough here. Play Rough gets the one-shot up against the Shadow Cacturn. They come back in with the Tentacruel. I can now go and fire off another Play Rough. Remember, they did actually overfarm a bit in the early matchup. I swap back into Togetic, and the opponent tries to farm me down. They're not able to do so. Psyshock gets the KO up against the Shadow Tentacruel, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there. Into next battle, we see Togetic into a Shadow Feraligatr. So, I'm going to stay in this matchup initially, of course. They could be on Ice Beam. I don't know what the secondary charge move is going to be. Either way, Hydro Cannon going to do quite a lot of damage anyways. So, I'm able to land a Psyshock. I then swap into a Azumarill. And by the way, Psyshock, despite being non-stab, does do slightly more damage than a Aerial Ace in neutral situations. So really, I only go for Aerial Ace up against Pokemon like Tropius or Cacturn, for example. Either way, I'm going to shield up my Azumarill as they do full send a Play Rough. I can now go for a full bubble farm down. They come in with a Mantine. I go straight for Play Rough there. Of course, Play Rough is not going to do too much damage here, but this is a non-XL Azumarill, so going to do slightly more damage than maybe you're used to seeing up against an Azumarill. But either way, Play Rough, number 2, gets them fairly low. I swap straight away into my Togetic, and I'm just going to have to no-shield here. The opponent goes for the Hydro Cannon. I'm able to reach a Side Shock, but the opponent might be able to shield once and then go for a full Shadow Claw farm down. Nope, the opponent is going to throw their energy, so at this point, I'm happy to let the Togetic go down. Hydro Cannon does get the KO there, but at this point, I'm in a tricky situation. I'm hoping to come in with Azumarill, force the opponent to throw the energy, but they don't. They commit to a huge farm down. That might be a mistake on my end, but the confusion damage will register. It will get the KO. They go for Crunch, but they don't debuff my defense. Now it just depends. Can I go for a full confusion farm down? They full send the Ice Beam there. It costs more energy, but the opponent's still able to reach a last second Aerial Ace. And of course, from this range, it takes out the Execute. And unfortunately, I do lose that game. But GG's up on there. Into next battle, we can see Amoonguss in the lead. So this is actually a fairly okay matchup for me. The opponent's going to say swap into Egg-Cellent. So I'm going to stay in here. And this was one of the earliest battles I did. So I wasn't actually sure which move would do more damage. I throw both of them here just to test it out to see which does more damage. And it does look like Side Shock did ever so slightly more damage. So from this point onwards, I will be going for Side Shock in those neutral situations. But either way, I'm going to overfarm in this matchup. This is just going to be a Surf, I believe, so I'm going to let this go through. Surf, not going to do too much damage here. I'm now going to overfarm massively, fire off the Side Shock here, and then eventually I think I will swap into Azumarill, trying to catch a Charge Reef here, not able to do so as the opponent does overfarm, but they come back in with their Amoonguss. Now, Azumarill, even in its non-XL state, is still incredibly bulky. Ice Beam does okay damage there, but I should also not be needing to shield a Charge Reef here. The opponent goes for Grass Knot. It does big damage, but I can reach a second Ice Beam. Now, of course, Ice Beam will get the KO from this range, so the opponent use their final shield, and they can commit to a huge Astonish farm down, but it just depends who wins CMP in this matchup. I'm going to come back in with the Togetic, and it's Togetic that wins CMP, so Side Shock will, of course, get the KO here. The opponent is going to come in with a Gastrodon, so this is huge for me, of course. Execute going to be an absolute wall to this Pokemon. Body Slam going to hit for neutral damage, but it's not going to do too much damage here. And you can see just how bulky this Pokemon is. They come back in with the Jellicent. Of course, all I have to do here is safely shield this up. They do bait with a Surf, but it doesn't matter. They're not reaching another charge move. And of course, I'm able to reach a double super effective Seed Bomb. Seed Bomb gets the one shot up against the Gastrodon, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on that. Into next battle, we see Togetic into a Serperior. So, a great lead matchup for me. The opponent is choosing to stay in initially. I'm not going to throw immediately here. I'm actually going to let the opponent throw first. The opponent does go for an Aerial Ace. That's fine with me. I can actually outpace them to back-to-back Aerial Aces here. So, I'm going to go and fire off the first one. Aerial Ace, going to do decent damage there. A second Aerial Ace probably gets the KO from this range. So, the opponent is going to use their first shield before swapping into a Shadow Empoleon. Now, I do not have a response to Empoleon whatsoever. So, I'm just going to swap into the Damage Sponge for this team Azumarill. The opponent fires off the Drill Peck there. Drill Peck does some decent damage, and they're already at a second Drill Peck. So at this point, I'm still going to no-shield. I am pretty confident that I can still reach 2 Play Roughs here up against this Empoleon. So Play Rough does some okay damage there, and before they farm me down, I can reach a second Play Rough. So Play Rough number 2 is going to be shielded by the opponent. I'm now going to swap out into my Execute. I'm not sure if that was the right play there, but I didn't want to allow them to just fully farm me down. I'm hoping, because I swapped out, I could get the Confusion farm down, but that is not the case. They're able to reach a back-to-back Drill Pecks there. Huge for the opponent. At this point, all shields are now down on both ends. The opponent comes in with a Galarian Weezing, but they do swap back into Serperior. So I'm going to bank the Charge Reef here. I'm actually now going to swap out. I can finally swap out. I swap into my Togetic, and I can snipe with the Aerial Ace. Aerial Ace gets the KO up against the Serperior. They come back in with the Weezing, and I am able to reach a Side Shock. But if the opponent is smart, they will farm up to back-to-back charge moves before firing off a Sludge. And it's basically just a guessing game right now. If I come in with the Azumarill and the opponent commits to a farm down, I lose the game. But if I come in with the Execute and go for the Charge Reef, and the opponent throws straight away, then unfortunately I will also lose the game. Sludge gets the KO there. 2 more Fairy Winds, 3 more Fairy Winds, takes out the Azumarill, and unfortunately I do lose that game. But GG's up on there, very well played. Into next battle, we see a Tropius in the lead. The opponent's going to say swap into Gallisopod, so this is fine with me. I can outpace them as they do swap out there. Taking one turn, I go for the Aerial Ace. I'm now going to swap out, try to catch a Charge Reef here, and I should resist everything unless they're running Aerial Ace, but either way, Aerial Ace, not the best Charge Reef anyway, so that's fine with me. However, Azumarill, going to be a very aggressive bubble farm down, and I actually don't know if I will be able to farm them down from this point. So at this point, I actually don't mind letting this next move go through. However, I will throw an Ice Beam to get the KO here. Even if they come back in with a Tropius, they will still be met with an Ice Beam anyways. So Ice Beam takes out the Gallisopod, but they actually come in with a Gastrodon. So this is looking really good for me. At this point, this should be game over. We can go straight for Play Rough. Play Rough does some respectable damage. They can Mud Slap farm me down. I can just come in with the Execute, realizing it's not that great up against the Tropius. Togetic can still do very well, of course, up against that Tropius. So this should be game over. I'm basically just going to sponge all of the energy from this Gastrodon here, commit to a full Confusion farm down. And this one, I'm thinking the opponent probably will swap out after this charge move. So I'm going to swap at the exact same time into my Togetic. And yeah, we can just go straight for Aerial Ace here. Aerial Ace, not the best move, but it is super effective. So it will do slightly more damage than a Side Shock in this matchup. And we can just spam them incredibly fast. So Aerial Ace, number 2, grabs the first shield from the opponent. I am going to, of course, shield this up here as they do bait with a Leaf Blade, but it doesn't really matter. I can now go for another Aerial Ace, and all I have to do now, as the switch clock should be coming up very soon, is to watch out for a potential catch from the opponent. So, of course, the opponent can't throw a fast move and then swap and catch, so they basically wait a turn. I don't throw straight away. I can now go for the Aerial Ace. Aerial Ace from this range. Actually doesn't get the KO there, but it doesn't really matter. One more Fairy Wind takes out the Tropius, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there. Into next battle, we see a Shadow Lapras in the lead. So, I'm actually going to stay in this matchup initially, then swap into a Azumarill, and the opponent actually swaps out at the same time, pretty much. So, I'm assuming that wasn't a reactionary swap, and instead, they swapped out maybe because they don't have Ice Beam. So, I'm going to go for a Play Rough here. You could argue I should have farmed up to a Hydro Pump. Maybe I did there. I can't remember. I do know in some battles, I didn't farm up to the Hydro Pump just because I actually wanted to guarantee some damage there. At this point, I'm happy to lose switch advantage, come in with my Togetic, get slightly ahead on energy, because what I didn't want to do is allow the Lapras to sideway farm down my Azumarill. They come back in with the Lapras. I'm confident they're not on Ice Beam, and I'm wrong. Ice Beam gets the one shot, and unless they've got something incredibly weak to Confusion in the back, I think that is going to be game over, unfortunately. The opponent fires off another Ice Beam. I'm going to massively overfarm here, go for an Ancient Power, fishing for another boost. I need the boost at this point. So Ancient Power is going to get the KO there, and we don't get the boost. It's going to be Walrein in the back. So I believe this is a team that Home/Henry showcased on his channel, and unfortunately, even though I've got a lot of energy here, I'm not going to be able to take out the Walrein, so I just allow them to fully Powder Snow farm me down, and I do lose that game. But GG's up on there, very well played. Into next battle, we see a Gastrodon in the lead. So the opponent's going to say swap into a Shadow Abomasnow. Huge core breaker for the team. However, I am one turn ahead of them, so I can fire off that Aerial Ace immediately and grab an early shield. At this point, I'm definitely just going to match shields here. They're on Weather Ball, so they should pace exactly the same to the charge moves as it takes Togetic to get to those Aerial Aces. But again, I am slightly ahead on energy because they had to swap out. So at this point, I can shield this. I can go straight for the Aerial Ace. I'm hoping Aerial Ace will just barely be enough damage to get the KO from this range, and it actually doesn't. So I swap into a Azumarill. I tried to snipe there or just catch a Weather Ball. Either way, the opponent swaps out into Gastrodon, probably expecting me to swap out there. So very smart, banking the energy. They're going to come in with the Gastrodon, and Azumarill should be okay in this matchup. As the opponent is going to go for the Earth Power. Probably should have just gone straight Ice Beam in this matchup, actually, realizing that Play Rough, I need 2 moves anyways to get the KO. But either way, I do tank the Body Slam there. I can now go for the Ice Beam. Ice Beam gets the KO. And the final Pokemon is going to be Araquanid. Now, this is really tricky for me, of course. Execute going to take double super effective damage from the Bug Bites. I come in with the Togetic, but I've got to be very wary of a potential snipe from the Abomasnow. So the opponent swaps, but it takes 1 turn for them to swap out, which means I'm actually able to get my own snipe with the Fairy Wind damage. They lose the energy there. I come in with the Execute, force the opponent to full send the Bug Buzz, which they do, but I am double resisting the Bug Bite damage here. I'm able to reach an Aerial Ace. Aerial Ace does not get the KO, and unfortunately, they're at the charge move. The opponent goes for a Bubble Beam, but it doesn't do much damage, and I'm actually able to Fairy Wind farm down the Araquanid from that range. I don't know how, and I'm able to take that game. But GG's to opponent there, incredibly close battle. Into the next battle, we see a huge core breaker to the team. So we're going to stay in this matchup initially, go for a side shock, and then I will swap out after one more fairy wind, assuming the opponent going to try and throw on good timing. Now, I'm able to catch what I assume to be an icy wind, but it doesn't really help me out. And actually, they come in with another core breaker to the team, and actually, even worse for me, especially since I'm now debuffed in my attack. I just can't hit this thing at all, really. You're going to see when I do finally go for a play rough here, it's not even going to do 50% of their HP. So really not a great position to be in, but I'm going to play this out anyways. Azumarill should be able to tank an energy ball from pretty much full health here. Not that comfortably, but we do tank it. So I can go for the play rough, grabs the shield from the opponent, I swap back into Togetic, and I'm able to reach an Aerial Ace before they do reach another charge move. So Aerial Ace gets the KO there. They come back in with their Dugong. I'm going to go for that side shock immediately, not throwing on the best timing, but I want to guarantee I get this off. Side shock does some okay damage. It puts them into Confusion Farm down range. But the opponent does overfarm quite a lot in that matchup. So at this point, we're going to come in with the Execute here. They will be able to reach a charge move before I can fully Confusion Farm them down. And it's very awkward to try and make a catch on a 4-turn fast move, but they've got Tropius in the back. There's just nothing I can do here. I'm already debuffed in my attack, and so I just concede the match. But GG's to opponent there. Into the next battle, we see a Shadow Cacturn in the lead. Great lead matchup for me. They're going to swap into Galissapod. I can go straight for Aerial Ace. Aerial Ace going to hit for super effective damage, and since last time, I wasn't actually able to put them into a comfortable range for me to bubble farm them down with my Azu. I'm staying in this time for quite a bit longer. I'm going to go for another Aerial Ace and then eventually swap into the Azumarill here, and now I should be able to go for that bubble farm down. The opponent fires off the Aqua Jet, but the switch clocks are so far misaligned, they can just swap back into their Shadow Cacturn. So smart play on the opponent's end. I go straight for Ice Beam, I grab the final shield from the opponent, and they're going to fire off a Trailblaze immediately. Now, an XL Azumarill might be able to tank that, but because it's not XL, they do get the KO there. And because I'm on Aerial Ace, I can make it to the charge move, outpace them before they get to another charge move there. Aerial Ace gets the KO. They come in with Jellicent, but I've got to be very careful here. Of course, they've got Galissapod, they swap, they make the catch, but honestly, I need to get rid of the Galissapod here, as an X-Scissor would hit for double super effective damage. So at this point, I'm happy to get the KO. I'm going to call a bait, but the opponent full sends the Shadow Ball there. I think that will now be game over. At this point, of course, I'm going to have to shield up the charge move. I'm going to try and reach back-to-back side shocks, but I just don't think I will get there in time. I can go for one Fairy Wind, fire off the side shock on good timing, but the opponent already at back-to-back surfs there. So of course, surf number 2 takes out the Togetic, and unfortunately, I do lose that game. But GG's to opponent there. Into the next battle, we see a great lead for us, leading into Gastrodon. So the opponent's going to say swap into a Shadow Tentacruel. I can go straight for Side Shock here, and if I do get this landing, then I will swap out straight away into my Execute here, assuming the opponent not going to be on Sludge Wave, although I did actually see quite a few Tentacruel on Sludge Wave today, so I don't know if someone made a video on it, but either way, it is just an Acid Spray this time around. They come in with a Carbink, and this is looking like a pretty good RPS team here. We can go straight for Seed Bomb. Seed Bomb is actually going to connect. I can come in with a Azumarill, and this should be a pretty comfortable matchup for us. Of course, they can hit for neutral damage with the Rock Throws, with the Power Gems, with the Moonblast, but either way, still going to be pretty comfortable for me. So I'm going to no-shield the first charge move. They go for Power Gem there. We're now going to come in with a Togetic, and of course, I'm resisting the Mud Slap damage, double resisting actually. So I'm going to let this first move go through. They go for a Body Slam. I'm going straight for Side Shock here. Side Shock, as I did mention, slightly better in those neutral situations, and the opponent is going to continue to overfarm, allowing me to reach another Side Shock, and they're just going to no-shield again. So at this point, I'm thinking the opponent might have just kind of given up at this point, but either way, I'm going to shield the Body Slam. I'm now going to fire off a Side Shock into the Carbink, coming back in. Side Shock is finally, well, no, never mind, it's still not going to be shielded by the opponent. And yeah, this is just game over. I've dealt so much damage with the charge moves that eventually I will just be able to fully bubble, farm down the rest of the team. So at this point, I'm going to shield here. I'm not going to bother throwing any more charge moves. They go for a Power Gem. We can go for that bubble farm down. We get the KO there. And even if the opponent did have a Body Slam, I could Fairy Wind, farm them down. So the opponent just concedes the match. But GG's up on there into the next battle, see a Tropius in the lead, so a greatly match up for me once again. The opponent is choosing to stay in here, so maybe core broken by the Togetic, but also it's not actually that dominant a matchup for us. They will actually get us fairly low in the zero shield scenario. So at this point, I'm going to no shield this. The opponent goes for an aerial ace there. Eventually, they do swap out into Jellicent. So at this point, I'm going to go straight for a Psyshock. Psyshock, not going to do too much damage, but it will get them, I mean, it's decent chip damage anyways. I've not got the best answer to Jellicent anyways, so I can go for a second Psyshock there, wait for the opponent to throw a charge move, and they will now finally go for a Shadow Ball. So they full send the Shadow Ball there, and now I'm going to bank a ton of energy swap into a Azumarill, and I'm able to catch a Surf. So of course, Surf is resisted damage. I'm not going to bother throwing a charge move at all here. I'm waiting for the opponent to possibly swap back into their Tropius. However, they're not swapping up. They go for a Shadow Ball. They do eventually swap into the Tropius. Of course, we've got Ice Beam for coverage. So Ice Beam going to be shielded by the Tropius, and they will be able to outpace me to the next charge move. So at this point, I'm going to shield the Leaf Blade there, as I can now reach another Ice Beam. I'm hoping to grab the final shield, but either way, if we get the KO, I don't mind that either, and the opponent does let that go through. Their final Pokemon is going to be a Shadow Marshtomp. So Marshtomp actually a little bit more tricky as a Mud Boy that does have access to Sludge, which did get a huge buff this season, but Execute, as I've mentioned already, is pretty bulky. We're able to take the Sludge there. The opponent swaps out. They swap back into Jellicent. They do have a charge move, however, and they do win CMP, but this is going to force them to throw that Sludge immediately. I can now come in with my Togetic. We go for the Psyshock. Psyshock is, of course, going to connect, and I'm able to outpace them to the next charge move as well, as they did throw that Sludge as soon as they got there. Psyshock, number 2, gets the KO up against the Marshtomp, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there into the next battle, we see a Shadow Empoleon. So this is a really awkward matchup for me. A huge core breaker to the team. I'm going to swap into a Azumarill, my damage sponge once again, and just no shield everything they throw. They go straight for Drill Peck there. I'm now going to see an opponent going into a Golisopod. So we're going to go straight for the Play Rough here. Play Rough is not going to do too much damage here, but they shouldn't be able to get a KO with any one charge move. So at this point, I'm going to no shield. I believe they're at 9 Shadow Claws, so I can't go for good timing here. I'm forced to throw straight away, otherwise they would actually outpace me to the next charge move, but Play Rough grabs a shield from the opponent. I realize I'm getting farmed down there, so I'm forced to swap back into the Togetic. They go for an Aqua Jet there. I'm going to wait for the opponent to inevitably swap back into the Empoleon. I need a huge energy advantage, and now we have that. So I'm going to go for the Psyshock. Psyshock, going to be no shielded by the opponent. I can reach another Psyshock, and this might even grab a shield from the opponent. Psyshock actually does not get shielded, but they can fully farm me down. They come out with 1 HP and a Dream. And unfortunately, I believe they might be very close to back-to-back charge moves. So I'm going to come in with the Azumarill, just sacrifice it here. Hydro Cannon gets the KO, but they were 1 away from back-to-back. They can go for the Steel Wing, then fire off another Drill Peck. Sorry, Metal Claw there. They come back in with Golisopod, and I need to go for a full Confusion farm down. They go for the X-Scissor, and again, they were 1 away from back-to-back charge moves. This opponent has just hit 4 charge moves in a row, and I've not been able to take them out with the Confusion. That's really frustrating. Kind of just shows how clunky Confusion is. If it was a 3-turn move there, I could have avoided 2 of those charge moves there, but either way, unfortunately, we do lose that game. But GG's opponent there into the final battle of this video. We're going to see a Gastrodon in the lead once again. They tank that first move, and then they swap into a Moongus, and this is absolutely fine with me. I'm going straight for Psyshock here. Psyshock is going to connect. It does big damage. I realize a second Psyshock probably just barely doesn't quite get the KO there. They actually go for a Grass Knot, so probably on Grass Knot and Foul Play there. So actually, I should be able to resist everything they throw. They're going to shield that next move, but I can easily outpace them to the next Psyshock. Psyshock will be getting the KO from that range, and they come in with Galarian Weezing. So at this point, I'm going to go for another Psyshock here. Psyshock is, again, going to be no shielded. And at this point, of course, happy to let the Togetic go down. This should be game over now already. We can come in with the Execute. All we have to do here is safely shield up the charge move from that Weezing. They can go for an Overheat. It doesn't really matter. Confusion will register. It gets the KO. They come back in with the Gastrodon. And all I have to do right now is farm up 2 back-to-back Seed Bombs. They go for an Earth Power there, maybe looking to drop my defense, but either way, it does not drop my defense. I'm able to tank it pretty comfortably, and I will reach a second Seed Bomb here before the opponent reaches another charge move. Seed Bomb number 2 gets the KO there, and I'm able to take that game. So that's going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you leave a like, leave a comment letting me know, and as well, don't forget to respond to the question of the day if you haven't done so already. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. And if you want to take your support even further, you can now become a channel member with perks including early access to new videos, shoutouts at the end of each video, custom loyalty badges, and custom emojis to use in the comments. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that has already become a channel member. Your support is greatly appreciated. And with that being said, thank you all so much for watching today's video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.